The sun hung low over the Montana territory, like a copper coin tossed to the heavens, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek. Eleanor Taylor clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stumbled down the wooden sidewalk, her legs weak from 3 days with barely a morsel to eat. The year was 1876, and like many who had ventured west following the war, Eleanor found herself at the mercy of fortune's cruel hand. Eleanor paused outside the general store, her reflection in the window revealing a woman barely recognizable to herself. Once the belle of Richmond society, now her auburn hair hung limp beneath a worn bonnet, her green eyes hollow with hunger and desperation. At 24, she was far too young to feel so utterly defeated. The small leather pouch in her pocket contained exactly 1 coin, a silver dollar that represented the last of her worldly wealth. She'd held onto it for weeks, knowing once it was gone, she truly had nothing. But hunger had finally won out over pride. Summoning what little strength remained, Eleanor pushed open the door to the general store. The bell jingled cheerfully, mocking her grim situation. The aroma of fresh bread from the baker's rack nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Can I help you, miss?" The shopkeeper's voice was neither kind nor unkind, simply businesslike. "A loaf of bread, please," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. The shopkeeper nodded and wrapped a loaf in brown paper. "That'll be 50 cents. Eleanor reached into her pocket, fingers trembling as she withdrew her lone silver dollar. She placed it on the counter with resignation, watching as the shopkeeper reached for it. A large, sun-bronzed hand suddenly covered hers, stopping the transaction. "Add some cheese and dried beef to that order," came a deep voice from behind her. "And whatever else the lady needs." Eleanor turned, startled to find herself looking up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man in a worn leather duster, trail dust still clinging to his clothes and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges of his Stetson. "I don't accept charity, sir," Eleanor said, trying to maintain what little dignity she had left. The man's expression softened slightly, though his hand remained firmly over hers, preventing her from releasing the coin. "It's not charity, madam. Consider it an advance." "An advance on what, precisely?" Eleanor asked, her voice strengthening with indignation despite her weakness. "I've got a proposition for you," he said, then quickly added when her eyes widened, "a proper business proposition. I'm Beau Xavier, owner of the Lazy X Ranch outside town. I need someone to help with cooking and keeping house. Previous housekeeper left to get married last month." Eleanor hesitated, studying the man more carefully. His clothing was worn but well kept, his stance confident without being threatening. There was something in his eyes, a steadiness, perhaps, that made her want to trust him despite her better judgment. "I don't know the first thing about ranch work, Mr. Xavier," Eleanor admitted. "Can you cook?" he asked. "Yes, though I'm hardly an expert. Can you read and write?" "Of course," she replied, a hint of her old pride surfacing. "That's more than most in these parts. Rest can be learned." His hand finally moved from hers, but instead of taking her coin, he folded her fingers back around it. "Keep that. You might need it." The shopkeeper cleared his throat impatiently. "Someone planning to pay for this order." Beau Xavier pulled several coins from his pocket and placed them on the counter. "Add some coffee and sugar too." Eleanor's mind raced. A job meant survival. It meant a roof and meals. But it also meant placing her trust in a complete stranger, miles from town in a territory where law was often whatever a man decided it was that day. "What's your name?" Beau asked, his voice gentler now. "Eleanor Taylor," she replied, standing a little straighter despite her exhaustion. "Well, Miss Taylor, decision's yours. Job pays $15 a month plus room and board. You'd have your own quarters in the house, separate from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands stay. $15 a month. The sum seemed princely compared to her current circumstances. Still, caution made her hesitate. "How do I know I can trust you, Mr. Xavier?" A slight smile crossed his face. "You don't." Just like I don't know if I can trust you not to burn down my kitchen. Sometimes life requires a leap of faith. The shopkeeper finished wrapping the additional items. Beau collected them and handed the package to Eleanor. My wagon's outside. I'm heading back to the ranch in an hour after I finish some business at the bank. If you're interested in the job, meet me there. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat slightly and walked out, leaving Eleanor standing with a package of food in one hand and her silver dollar still clutched in the other. Eleanor found a quiet spot on a bench outside and unwrapped a small piece of bread and cheese. As the first real food in days hit her stomach, she closed her eyes in relief. Around her, Silver Creek bustled with afternoon activity miners, cowboys, and shopkeepers going about their business. A town on the rise, they said, thanks to silver discoveries in the nearby hills. She had arrived 3 weeks ago with enough money for 2 months' boarding house rent, confident she would find work as a teacher or perhaps a clerk. But Silver Creek already had a schoolteacher, and no business would hire a woman for clerical work when men were seeking the same positions. Her savings dwindled with alarming speed. Last week, the boarding house owner had politely but firmly asked her to leave when she couldn't pay. She'd spent 3 nights sleeping in the church, slipping in after dark and out before dawn, avoiding the kindly but inquisitive pastor who would surely ask questions she was too ashamed to answer. Eleanor finished her small meal and carefully wrapped the rest. Looking down the street, she could see Beau Xavier emerging from the bank, his tall figure easily recognizable even at a distance. Decision time. Pride whispered for her to walk away, to somehow make her own way. Pragmatism reminded her that she was 1 day away from real starvation. And something else, curiosity, perhaps made her wonder about the ranch and the man with the steady blue eyes. She stood, gathered her meager belongings, a carpet bag containing 2 dresses, undergarments, and a worn Bible, and walked toward the waiting wagon. Beau Xavier looked up as she approached, his expression revealing nothing. "You've decided," he stated rather than asked. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier, though I reserve the right to leave if the situation proves unsuitable." He nodded, helping her up onto the wagon seat. "Fair enough, and it's just Beau. Mr. Xavier makes me look around for my father." As they pulled away from Silver Creek, Eleanor cast one last glance at the dusty town. She still had her coin and now, perhaps, a fighting chance. The journey to the Lazy X Ranch took over 2 hours, following a winding trail through rolling hills covered with prairie grass and scattered pine trees. Eleanor sat straight-backed beside Beau, maintaining a proper distance despite the wagon's occasional jostling that threatened to throw her against him. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, breaking a long silence. "Going on 5 years now," Beau replied, his eyes scanning the horizon as he spoke. "Came out after the war with barely more than the clothes on my back. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny, started with a small parcel and a dozen head of cattle, been building it up since." "You fought in the war?" Eleanor asked carefully, conscious of old wounds that still hadn't healed across the divided nation. "Union cavalry," he confirmed. "Though that doesn't matter much out here. West doesn't care which side you fought for, only what you do now." Eleanor nodded, looking down at her hands. "I'm from Virginia originally." "Figured as much from your accent," Beau said. "War hit your family hard. We lost everything," Eleanor said simply. "Father died at Chancellorsville, mother followed 2 years later. Our home was requisitioned, then burned." Beau was quiet for a moment. "War took a lot from a lot of people. Sorry for your losses." The wagon crested a hill, and Eleanor's breath caught as the valley below came into view. A large log house stood proudly near a creek lined with cottonwoods. Several outbuildings, a corral filled with horses, and a large barn completed the picture. In the distance, cattle grazed on the open range. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's home," Beau replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Not fancy, but solid." As they approached, 3 ranch hands stopped their work to watch the wagon arrive. Eleanor felt their curious gazes and sat a little straighter. "That's Jake, Thomas, and Miguel," Beau explained, nodding toward the men. "5 more out with the herd right now. They bunk in the bunkhouse, except for Cal, the foreman. He has a small cabin behind the barn." The wagon pulled up in front of the main house. Up close, Eleanor could see it was larger than she'd initially thought, 2 stories with a wide porch wrapping around the front. "This is far grander than I expected," Eleanor admitted as Beau helped her down from the wagon. Previous owner built it with Eastern lumber brought in by wagon, planned to start a dynasty out here. A wry smile touched Beau's lips. Drought and hard winters convinced him otherwise. "I got it for a good price." He carried her carpet bag and led her inside. The interior was surprisingly spacious, with a large main room containing a stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and bookshelves filled with volumes that made Eleanor's heart lift. A long dining table capable of seating at least 10 dominated one end of the room. "Kitchen's through there," Beau indicated with a nod. "Your quarters are upstairs, first door on the right. Mine's at the end of the hall. Other rooms are empty save for one I use as an office." Eleanor followed him upstairs to a modest but comfortable bedroom containing a proper bed with a quilt, a washstand, a small dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the valley. "It's lovely," she said, genuinely pleased. "Gets cold in winter, but the chimney from the fireplace runs through the wall there, helps keep it warm." Beau set her bag down. "I'll let you get settled. Supper's usually at 6. Men eat in the bunkhouse except Sundays when everyone eats together." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Taylor, Eleanor, I know this isn't what you planned for yourself, but it's honest work and you'll be treated with respect here." "Thank you," Eleanor said, surprised by the unexpected kindness in his words. After he left, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by how quickly her circumstances had changed. From nearly starving on the streets to having a room, a job, and the promise of regular meals, all because a stranger had stopped her from spending her last coin. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver dollar, turning it over in her hand. A year ago, such a sum would have seemed trivial. Now it represented something precious possibility. Eleanor washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into her cleanest dress, and steeled herself to begin her new duties. Whatever the future held at Lazy X Ranch, it had to be better than the path she'd been on that morning. The kitchen proved to be well equipped, but clearly unused for anything beyond basic cooking. Eleanor found coffee brewing on the stove strong enough to stand a spoon in, she thought with a grimace after tasting it, and decided her first contribution would be making a proper pot. She was exploring the pantry when Beau returned. "Found everything you need?" he asked, filling a cup with the tar-like coffee without apparent concern for its quality. "I believe so," Eleanor replied, "though I'm not sure what supplies you typically keep, Mrs. Hendricks, the previous housekeeper, usually made a list every other week. I'd pick things up in town." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Cook whatever you think best. Men aren't particular so long as there's plenty of it. And what about you?" Eleanor asked, surprised by her own boldness. A flicker of something amusement perhaps crossed his face. "I'm not particular either. Been eating my own, cooking too long to complain about anyone else's." As Eleanor began preparing a simple supper of beef stew with the ingredients available, Beau remained in the kitchen, occasionally answering her questions about the ranch, but mostly watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Have I grown an extra head, Mr. Xavier?" she finally asked, setting aside her natural reserve. "Beau," he corrected automatically, "and no, just trying to figure you out." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "There's not much to figure out. I'm simply a woman who's fallen on hard times." "There's more to it than that," he said, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Your speech, your manners. You weren't raised to be anybody's housekeeper." Eleanor stiffened. "If you doubt my ability to fulfill my duties, I don't," he interrupted, "just making an observation." "Everyone out here has a story, Eleanor. Most involve running from something or toward something. And which are you? She countered. A genuine smile transformed his face, creating crinkles at the corners of his eyes. Both, I expect, same as you. Before Eleanor could respond, the ranch foreman Cal knocked on the back door, bringing news about a broken fence line that required Beau's attention. With a nod to Eleanor, Beau set down his coffee cup and left. That evening, Eleanor served supper to Beau alone, as the ranch hands ate in their bunkhouse as he'd explained. The stew was simple but flavorful, accompanied by biscuits she'd managed to prepare despite the limitations of the pantry. "This is good," Beau said after his first bite, sounding genuinely surprised. "Real good." "You needn't sound so astonished," Eleanor replied, though she felt a small glow of pride. "I did tell you I could cook." "Most people overstate their abilities," Beau said, breaking open a biscuit. "Nice to find someone who doesn't." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Through the window, Eleanor watched as darkness settled over the ranch, stars appearing in a sky bigger than any she'd seen back east. Despite her exhaustion, she felt a curious sense of peace. "I should warn you," Beau said eventually. "We're expecting the cattle buyer next week. He usually stays for supper, sometimes overnight if it gets too late." "I'll be prepared," Eleanor assured him. "Is there anything else I should know about my duties?" Beau considered this. "Ranch can get busy, especially during roundup and branding. Sometimes there'll be extra hands to feed. Washing's done once a week. There's a wash house out back. House cleaning as you see fit." He paused. "Previous housekeeper also kept the books. Don't know if you've any head for figures." "I managed my father's household accounts from the time I was 16, Eleanor said. "I'm quite proficient with bookkeeping." Beau nodded, clearly pleased. "That'll be helpful. I can do the sums, but paperwork isn't my strong suit." After supper, Eleanor insisted on cleaning up despite Beau's protest that she should rest after her journey. As she worked, she could hear him moving about in the main room, the occasional creak of a chair and the rustle of papers suggesting he was catching up on ranch business. When she finally finished, she found him at the dining table, account books spread before him, a frown of concentration on his face. He looked up as she entered, running a hand through his dark hair in apparent frustration. "Problem?" Eleanor asked. "Cattle prices are dropping again," he said. "Need to figure if we should sell now or wait for better prices in the fall." Eleanor hesitated, then said, "May I?" At his nod, she sat across from him and turned the ledger so she could read it. After a few moments of studying the figures, she said, "Your operating costs are relatively stable. If you can manage through summer without selling, fall prices have historically been better, especially with the railroad expanding eastward." Beau looked at her with newfound respect. "Where did you learn about cattle markets?" "I didn't," Eleanor admitted. "But economics follows patterns regardless of the commodity. My father taught me that." "What did your father do before the war?" Beau asked. Eleanor's hands stilled on the ledger. "He owned a shipping company in Richmond and a tobacco plantation outside the city." Understanding dawned in Beau's eyes. "You were wealthy." "We were," Eleanor acknowledged, "until we weren't." Beau was quiet for a moment. "Life has a way of humbling us all eventually." "Indeed it does." Eleanor closed the ledger. "If you don't mind, I think I'll retire now." It's been a rather eventful day. Beau stood as she rose, a gesture of courtesy that surprised her. "Of course. Rest well, Eleanor." As she climbed the stairs to her new room, Eleanor found herself wondering about the enigmatic rancher who had so unexpectedly changed her fate. There was more to Beau Xavier than the typical rough-hewn frontiersman. Education, for one thing, and a sensitivity she hadn't expected. In her room, Eleanor changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, the exhaustion of recent weeks catching up with her all at once. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Beau's blue eyes and the curious feeling that, against all odds, she might have found a safe harbor in this wild territory. The first rays of dawn were filtering through her window when Eleanor awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. As memory returned, she rose quickly, determined to begin her duties before anyone could question her worth. The house was silent as she moved downstairs and set about preparing breakfast. She found eggs, bacon, and the makings for hotcakes in the pantry. Soon the kitchen was filled with the comforting aromas of cooking. She was flipping the last of the hotcakes when Beau appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day's work in denims, a flannel shirt, and boots. He stopped short at the sight of the laden table. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, eyeing the spread with appreciation nonetheless. "It's my job," Eleanor replied simply, pouring coffee into a mug for him. She'd made it properly this time, and the rich aroma filled the kitchen. Beau accepted the coffee, his fingers briefly brushing hers. "Well, it's a mighty fine way to start the day." They ate together, the initial awkwardness gradually easing as they discussed the day ahead. Beau explained the ranch routines and introduced her to the pantry inventory system Mrs. Hendricks had established. "I'll be riding the north pasture most of today," he told her as he finished his breakfast. "Cal or one of the boys will be around if you need anything." After he left, Eleanor spent the morning acquainting herself with the house. It was well built, but showed signs of neglect in the details' dusty corners, curtains that needed washing, floors that wanted polishing. She rolled up her sleeves and set to work, grateful for the physical activity after weeks of uncertainty. By mid-afternoon, the main room gleamed, and Eleanor had moved on to taking inventory of the pantry and root cellar, making notes of supplies that needed replenishing. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the approaching rider until a shadow fell across the open kitchen door. Looking up, she found herself facing a man she didn't recognize, tall and lean, with a weathered face and cold eyes that assessed her with unsettling intensity. "Well now," he drawled, leaning against the doorframe without invitation. "Xavier's got himself a new housekeeper. And a pretty one at that." Eleanor straightened, instinctively drawing back. "Mr. Xavier isn't here at present. May I tell him who called?" The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I think you know who I am, miss. James Blackwell doesn't need introductions in these parts." Eleanor maintained her composure despite the man's intimidating presence. "Nevertheless, Mr. Blackwell, I've only just arrived yesterday. I'm not acquainted with the neighbors." "Neighbors," Blackwell repeated with a short laugh. "That's one way of putting it. Tell Xavier I stopped by. Tell him I'm still waiting on his answer about my offer." "I'll convey your message," Eleanor said coolly. Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've got spirit, I like that." He pushed away from the doorframe but made no move to leave. "What's your name, girl?" "Eleanor Taylor." "And I'm hardly a girl, Mr. Blackwell." "No, you certainly aren't," he agreed, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made Eleanor's skin crawl. "Well, Miss Taylor, welcome to Montana territory. Hope you last longer than Xavier's last housekeeper." With that cryptic remark, he touched his hat and sauntered away. Eleanor watched from the window as he mounted his horse and rode off, only releasing her breath when he disappeared from view. She was still standing there when Cal, the ranch foreman, appeared in the yard. He glanced in the direction Blackwell had gone, his expression hardening before he approached the house. "You all right, Miss Taylor?" he asked, removing his hat as he entered. "Saw Blackwell riding off." "I'm fine," Eleanor assured him, though I found his manner rather presumptuous. Cal snorted. "That's putting it mildly. James Blackwell's been trying to buy out the boss for 2 years now. When that didn't work, he tried other methods, blocking access to water, rustling a few head here and there, making threats." "That sounds more like criminal behavior than business negotiation," Eleanor observed. "That's how Blackwell operates," Cal said grimly. "His father was the same way, built the biggest spread in the territory by forcing out smaller ranchers. James is determined to continue the tradition." "And Mr. Xavier refuses to sell?" "Boss is stubborn that way," Cal replied, a note of respect in his voice. "Built this place from nothing, won't give it up without a fight." Eleanor considered this information as she prepared supper that evening. When Beau returned, Dusty and tired from a day in the saddle, she waited until he'd washed up before mentioning Blackwell's visit. Beau's expression darkened at the news. "What exactly did he say to you?" Eleanor recounted the conversation, including Blackwell's parting comment about her predecessor. "Cal mentioned there's been some trouble with him." "Cal talks too much," Beau muttered, though without real anger. He sat heavily in his chair at the table. "Blackwell wants my water rights. Creek that runs through this property feeds his western pastures. He's offered to buy me out 3 times, each offer lower than the last. And when you refused, things started happening. Fences cut, cattle disappearing, nothing that could be proven, but everyone knows." Eleanor set a plate before him: roast beef, potatoes, and carrots she'd found in the root cellar. "Is that why Mrs. Hendricks left? Because of Blackwell?" Beau looked up sharply. "What makes you think that?" "Just something he said, that I might not last as long as my predecessor." Beau's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Hendricks left to get married, like I told you, but before that, there was an incident. Someone fired shots into the house one night when I was away. She was frightened, understandably." "You believe it was Blackwell? Can't prove it," Beau said, his voice hard. "But yes." Eleanor absorbed this unsettling information. "Should I be concerned?" Beau met her gaze directly. "I won't lie to you. Blackwell's dangerous, but I don't think he'd harm a woman. That's not his style. He prefers intimidation." "I'm not easily intimidated, Mr. Xavier," Eleanor said firmly. A ghost of a smile touched Beau's lips. "No, I don't imagine you are." He hesitated, then added, "All the same, I'd feel better if you didn't wander too far from the house alone, at least until we see what Blackwell's next move is." Eleanor nodded her agreement, though the thought of being constrained chafed at her independent spirit. Still, she wasn't foolish. The territories were lawless enough without deliberately placing herself in danger. As the days passed, Eleanor settled into life at the Lazy X. The work was demanding but satisfying. She cleaned, cooked, washed, and gradually brought order to the household accounts, which had fallen into disarray since Mrs. Hendricks' departure. Each evening, she and Beau would discuss the day's business over supper, their initial employer-employee formality slowly evolving into something more companionable. Eleanor discovered that beneath Beau's reserved exterior lay a thoughtful, educated mind. He had attended university in Pennsylvania before the war interrupted his studies. His bookshelf contained volumes of history, philosophy, and literature alongside practical manuals on animal husbandry and agriculture. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Xavier," Eleanor commented one evening as they sat by the fire, she with mending in her lap, he reading a dog-eared copy of Emerson's essays. "I could say the same about you," he replied, looking up from his book. "Not many women could adapt so quickly to ranch life after growing up in luxury." "Necessity is a powerful teacher," Eleanor said, her needle flashing in the firelight as she repaired a tear in one of his shirts. "And I wasn't entirely unprepared. The war changed everything for Southern women. We learned to make do, to work with our hands to survive. Still, it couldn't have been easy." Eleanor's hands stilled. "No, it wasn't easy, but we endured." She resumed her sewing. "In some ways, it was a valuable lesson. I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed." Beau watched her for a long moment. "You're a remarkable woman, Eleanor Taylor." The simple statement, delivered with quiet sincerity, caused a curious warmth to bloom in Eleanor's chest. She kept her eyes on her work, not trusting herself to meet his gaze. "You're too kind, Mr. Xavier." "Beau," he reminded her, "after a month of keeping my house and listening to my troubles, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Very well, Beau." The way she said his name, soft and tentative, hung in the air between them, charged with something neither was ready to acknowledge. The following Sunday brought all the ranch hands to the main house for the traditional weekly dinner. Eleanor had prepared a feast: roast chickens, potatoes, fresh bread, and an apple pie that had the men practically falling over themselves with compliments. She observed with interest the easy camaraderie between Beau and his men. He was clearly the boss, but there was mutual respect evident in their interactions. The men treated Eleanor with courteous deference, though she noted a few exchanged glances when they thought she wasn't looking. After the meal, as the men relaxed on the porch with pipes and coffee, Cal approached Eleanor in the kitchen. "That was a fine dinner, Miss Taylor," he said, offering to help with the dishes. "Thank you, Cal," Eleanor replied, handing him a towel, "and I appreciate the assistance." They worked in companionable silence for a few moments before Cal said casually, "Boss seems different these days." "Different how?" Eleanor asked, curious despite herself. "Happier, I guess, more settled." Cal carefully dried a plate. "He's a good man, the boss, been through a lot." "Yes, I gather the war was difficult for him," Eleanor said. Cal nodded. "That and what came after. Lost his wife and baby during the first winter here." Eleanor nearly dropped the pot she was washing. "His wife?" "Yes, Sarah was her name. Complications after the baby came early. Doctor couldn't get here in time through the snow." Cal seemed to realize he'd shared something significant. "I'm sorry, Miss Taylor, thought you knew." "No," Eleanor said softly. "He never mentioned it." "Boss doesn't talk about it much," Cal said, "but it changed him." Threw himself into building the ranch after that, like he was trying to outwork the grief. Eleanor's mind raced, reassessing everything she knew about Beau Xavier. The reserved manner, the solitary life, the determination to hold onto his land all took on new meaning with this revelation. "Please don't mention that I told you," Cal said, looking uncomfortable. "It's not my place to speak of the boss's personal matters." "Of course," Eleanor assured him. Later that evening, after the men had returned to the bunkhouse, Eleanor sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in fiery hues. She heard Beau's footsteps, before she saw him, the familiar rhythm of his boots on the wooden planks announcing his approach. "Mind some company?" he asked. Eleanor moved over on the bench, making room for him. "Not at all." Beau sat beside her, stretching his long legs out before him. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods by the creek. "Cal told me about your wife," Eleanor said finally, her voice gentle. "And your child. I'm so sorry, Beau." Beau went very still beside her. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Figured someone would tell you eventually." "Why didn't you?" Eleanor asked, not accusingly, merely curious. Beau took a deep breath. "Some griefs are so deep, naming them gives them power all over again." "I understand," Eleanor said softly. "Do you?" Beau turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. "My fiancé died at Gettysburg," Eleanor said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "We were to be married when he returned." "I received his letters for weeks after he was already gone, each one full of plans for our future." Beau's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, his calloused fingers enveloping her smaller ones. "I'm sorry." They sat that way for a long time, hands joined, sharing the weight of old sorrows beneath the vast Montana sky. When Eleanor finally rose to retire for the night, something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a bridge across the careful distance they'd maintained. As spring gave way to summer, life at the Lazy X fell into a pleasant rhythm. Eleanor's presence transformed the ranch house from merely a place of shelter to a true home. Fresh curtains brightened the windows. Flowers from the meadow appeared in jars on the table, and the aroma of home-cooked meals regularly filled the air. Eleanor's world expanded beyond domestic duties as she learned more about ranch operations. Beau began including her in business discussions, valuing her sharp mind and practical suggestions. She discovered she had a talent for organization that extended beyond household matters to the complex logistics of running a cattle operation. One bright June morning, Beau appeared at breakfast with an unexpected proposal. "Thought you might want to see more of the ranch today," he said casually. "Cal and the boys can handle things without me for one day." Eleanor looked up in surprise. Are you suggesting I neglect my duties to go riding? I'm suggesting you expand your understanding of lazy X operations, Beau replied with a hint of a smile. Consider it part of your job. In that case, Eleanor said, returning his smile, I accept. An hour later, they rode out together, Eleanor on a gentle mare Beau had selected especially for her. Her riding habit, hastily adapted from one of her better dresses, was hardly proper. But she found she cared little for propriety as the exhilaration of freedom swept through her. Beau proved to be an excellent guide, pointing out landmarks and explaining the seasonal patterns of ranch work. They rode to the northern boundary marked by a ridge of pine-covered hills, then followed the creek that was the ranch's lifeblood back toward the southern pastures. It's beautiful, Eleanor said as they paused atop a small rise overlooking the valley. I had no idea the ranch was so vast. 15,000 acres, Beau said with quiet pride. Not as big as Blackwell's spread, but good land, well watered. Is that why he wants it so badly? Eleanor asked. Partly, Beau admitted, but I think it's more than that for him. His father built an empire by swallowing up smaller ranches. James wants to prove he can do the same. He sounds like a man driven by something other than practical considerations. Pride, Beau said. And a need to fill his father's boots. Dangerous combination. They dismounted by the creek to rest the horses and enjoy the lunch Eleanor had packed. Sitting on a blanket spread beneath a cottonwood tree, they ate bread, cheese, and cold chicken while watching the clear water bubble over stones. I never thought I'd find peace again after Sarah died, Beau said suddenly, breaking a long, comfortable silence. Figured I'd just work until I couldn't anymore, then fade away like so many men out here do. Eleanor studied his profile, noting how the tension that often marked his features had eased. And now, Beau turned to meet her gaze, his blue eyes searching hers. Now I'm not so sure that's my path anymore. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. Eleanor became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the subtle scent of his shaving soap mingled with leather and sun-warmed skin. Beau reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. His touch lingered on her cheek, gentle as a whisper. Eleanor, he said, her name a question and invitation wrapped in 2 syllables. Before she could respond, the crack of a rifle shot shattered the moment. Beau reacted instantly, pushing Eleanor down and covering her body with his as a second shot splintered bark from the tree above their heads. Stay down, he ordered, his voice transformed from tender to commanding in an instant. He drew his revolver and scanned the surrounding terrain. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, fear and shock rendering her momentarily speechless. Beau's weight pressed her into the grass, protective rather than crushing, his body a shield between her and danger. No more shots came. After several tense minutes, Beau cautiously raised his head. I think they're gone, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Can you make it to the horses if I cover you? Eleanor nodded, finding her voice at last. Yes. Stay low, go when I say. With his gun ready, Beau helped Eleanor to a crouch. At his signal, she ran for the horses, her legs shaky but determined. Beau followed, keeping himself between her and the direction the shots had come from. They mounted quickly and rode hard for the ranch, taking a circuitous route that kept them under tree cover where possible. Eleanor clung to her saddle, her mind racing as fast as her pulse. Someone had tried to kill them, or at least frighten them badly. Back at the ranch, Beau helped Eleanor from her horse, his hands lingering on her waist as he searched her face with concern. Are you all right? Yes, she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. Just shaken. Beau's expression darkened. This has gone too far. I'm riding to town tomorrow, bringing back the sheriff. You think it was Blackwell? Eleanor asked as they entered the house. Can't prove it, Beau said grimly, but who else would it be? Eleanor sank into a chair, the events of the day catching up with her. They could have killed us. I don't think that was the intention, Beau said, pouring her a small glass of whiskey and pressing it into her hands. Drink this. It'll help with the shock. Eleanor took a sip, gasping slightly as the liquor burned a path down her throat. If not to kill us, then what? A warning, Beau said, taking the chair opposite her. Blackwell's getting impatient. Eleanor studied him across the small table, noting the tension that had returned to his shoulders, the hard set of his jaw. You're not considering selling to him, are you? Never, Beau stated flatly. This land is mine. Everything I've built here, everything I've worked for, I won't let him take it. Even if it's dangerous to stay, Eleanor asked softly. Beau's eyes met hers, fierce with determination. Some things are worth fighting for, Eleanor. In that moment, looking into his unwavering blue gaze, Eleanor knew with sudden clarity that he wasn't just talking about the ranch. True to his word, Beau rode to Silver Creek the next morning to fetch the sheriff. Eleanor spent an anxious day waiting for his return, jumping at every sound beyond the windows. Cal arranged for one of the ranch hands to remain near the house at all times, a precaution that both reassured and unsettled her. Late afternoon brought Beau back, accompanied by Sheriff Daniel Murray, a solid man with a gray-streaked beard and watchful eyes that missed nothing. Miss Taylor, the sheriff greeted her with a respectful nod. Beau here tells me you had quite a scare yesterday. Yes, Sheriff, Eleanor confirmed, describing the incident as precisely as she could. Sheriff Murray listened carefully, occasionally asking for clarification. When she finished, he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Can't do much without proof of who did the shooting, but I'll have a word with Blackwell. Let him know I'm keeping an eye on the situation. You think that'll make a difference? Beau asked skeptically. Might, the sheriff replied. Blackwell's careful about keeping the law on his side, at least officially. He won't want attention drawn to any irregular activities. After sharing supper with them, Sheriff Murray prepared to return to town. I'll be back in a few days to check on things, he promised. Meanwhile, keep alert. Might be a good idea to have someone with Miss Taylor whenever she's outside the house. After seeing the sheriff off, Beau joined Eleanor on the porch. The evening was warm, fireflies beginning to flicker among the shadows of approaching dusk. I'm sorry about all this, Beau said quietly. When I hired you, I never intended to put you in danger. You didn't know this would happen, Eleanor replied, and I'm not sorry I came here. She hesitated, then added softly, not at all. Beau turned to face her, his expression solemn in the fading light. Eleanor, if you want to leave, return to town where it's safer, I'd understand. I could arrange— No, she interrupted firmly. I'm not leaving. It could get worse before it gets better, Beau warned. Eleanor lifted her chin. I've faced worse than James Blackwell's intimidation tactics. I survived the war, the loss of everything my family built, poverty and hunger. I won't be chased away by a bully with delusions of grandeur. A slow smile spread across Beau's face, transforming his features. You're something else, Eleanor Taylor. So I've been told, she replied with a small smile of her own. Beau's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. About yesterday, before the shooting, I meant to say something to you, something important. Eleanor's heart quickened. Yes, I've come to care for you, Eleanor. More than I thought possible, more than I've allowed myself to feel in a very long time. His voice was low, earnest. I understand if you don't feel the same or if it's too soon. Eleanor squeezed his hand, stopping his words. It's not too soon, and I do feel the same. The confession, simple and direct, hung in the air between them. Beau's eyes searched hers for a long moment before he leaned forward slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished. Instead, Eleanor met him halfway, her lips touching his in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something more certain. When they finally parted, Beau rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. I never expected to find you, he murmured. Never thought I'd feel this way again. Nor I, Eleanor admitted. But here we are. Here we are, Beau agreed, drawing her into his arms as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The next weeks passed in a curious mixture of tension and joy. Blackwell made no further overt moves against the ranch, But Beau and his men remained vigilant, never riding out alone, always keeping weapons close at hand. Sheriff Murray visited twice, bringing news that Blackwell had denied any involvement in the shooting incident, but seemed subdued by the official attention. Against this backdrop of uncertainty, Eleanor and Beau's relationship blossomed. Their evenings together lengthened, conversations deepening as they shared more of their histories, hopes, and dreams. Beau spoke of Sarah and the child he'd lost, pain still evident in his voice, but tempered now by time and the healing presence of new love. Eleanor told him of her life before the war, of her fiancé Robert's death at Gettysburg, and of the hard journey that had eventually led her west. "I carried this with me all the way from Virginia," Eleanor said one evening, showing Beau the silver dollar that had been in her pocket when they first met. "It was the last of my inheritance, one coin from a family fortune that once seemed inexhaustible." Beau took it carefully, turning it over in his hand. "And now, what does it mean to you now?" "A reminder," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "of how quickly fortunes can change for worse or better." Beau returned the coin, his fingers lingering on hers. "I'm grateful every day that you tried to use this to buy bread in my presence." Eleanor smiled. "As am I, though I was quite cross with you at the time for not letting me pay." "Best money I never took," Beau said, drawing her into his arms for a kiss that left them both breathless. As summer reached its zenith, bringing long, hot days and brief, star-filled nights, Beau began making trips into Silver Creek more frequently. Eleanor noticed his preoccupation, but attributed it to ranch business until Cal let slip a comment about the boss's special project in town. "Special project?" Eleanor questioned, her curiosity piqued. Cal looked suddenly uncomfortable. "Just something he's been working on. Not my place to say more, Miss Taylor." Eleanor's imagination conjured various possibilities, none entirely satisfactory. She told herself it didn't matter, that Beau was entitled to his privacy. Yet a seed of unease took root nonetheless. Her uncertainty came to a head one evening in late July, when Beau returned from town later than expected, a mysterious air about him as he evaded her questions about his day. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor finally asked directly as they sat on the porch after supper. "You've been distant since you returned." Beau seemed startled by her perception. "No, nothing's wrong, just been thinking about some things. Things you can't share with me." Eleanor pressed, unable to keep a note of hurt from her voice. Beau was silent for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Was hoping to do this with a bit more romance, but I've never been good at keeping secrets from you." Eleanor stared at the box, her heart suddenly racing. "Beau!" He opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small diamond that caught the last rays of sunset. "I had to order this special from Denver, been making trips to check if it had arrived." "That was your special project?" Eleanor asked, feeling both foolish and elated. "Yes," Beau confirmed, taking her hand. "Eleanor Taylor, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I've learned that time measures poorly when it comes to matters of the heart. I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Beau Xavier, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand alone. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, admiring the way the diamond captured the fading light. "Not half as beautiful as you," Beau replied, drawing her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to one another. They agreed to marry in September, after the most intensive ranch work of the season was complete. Word of their engagement spread quickly, bringing congratulations from the ranch hands and townsfolk alike. Even Sheriff Murray rode out specifically to offer his good wishes, though Eleanor noted the careful way his eyes scanned the surrounding landscape, ever vigilant. Only James Blackwell remained ominously silent. No further incidents occurred, yet Beau maintained the heightened security measures, unwilling to risk Eleanor's safety. He's waiting for something, Beau confided to Eleanor one night. Blackwell isn't the type to give up easily. What could he be waiting for? Eleanor asked, concern etching lines between her brows. I don't know, Beau admitted, but I'll be ready when he makes his move. The answer came sooner than expected. One sweltering August afternoon, as Eleanor was preserving the summer's bounty of vegetables from the kitchen garden she'd established, Cal burst into the kitchen, his face grave. Fire, Miss Taylor. Western pastures ablaze. Eleanor's stomach dropped. The western pasture was their driest land, covered in tall grass that would burn like tinder in the summer heat. Is Beau, boss is already heading out with the men, asked me to stay here with you. Cal's expression conveyed what he didn't say aloud, that the timing of the fire, during the hottest part of the driest month, was no coincidence. Eleanor moved to the window, where she could see a column of smoke rising in the distance. Will they be able to contain it? If the wind holds steady, maybe, Cal said grimly. If it shifts toward the house. He didn't finish the thought. For hours, Eleanor and Cal watched from the porch as the smoke grew, billowing black against the blue sky. Occasionally, they could see distant figures moving along the fire line. Beau and his men fighting desperately to save their livelihood. As dusk approached, the wind shifted, sending sparks and ash toward the ranch buildings. Cal swore under his breath. Miss Taylor, we need to prepare. Get what you can't bear to lose. We might have to leave in a hurry. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing as she hurried upstairs. She grabbed her carpet bag, filling it with essentials: her mother's locket, the few letters she had from her parents, the Bible, and a change of clothing. Her hand hesitated over the silver dollar on her dresser, then picked it up and slipped it into her pocket. Downstairs, she found Cal filling buckets with water. In case embers reach the roof, he explained. Though if the fire gets that close, the house is probably lost. Eleanor took a bucket and joined him in the yard, her eyes stinging from smoke as they waited and watched. The fire's glow lit the horizon now, a hellish orange that turned the twilight sky an unnatural color. Just as full darkness fell, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Beau appeared from the smoke-hazed night, his face and clothes blackened, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. How bad? Cal asked as Beau dismounted. We lost the western pasture, Beau replied, his voice rough from smoke. Managed to keep it from spreading to the north range. The creek stopped it on the south side. The cattle? Eleanor asked, handing him a ladle of water. Most got out. We'll have a better count in the morning. Beau drank deeply, then wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Fire didn't start by itself. Found kerosene cans along the fence line. Cal's expression hardened. Blackwell. Has to be, Beau agreed, but we'll never prove it. What now? Eleanor asked, taking Beau's smoke-stained hand in hers. Beau's eyes met hers, determination visible through the layer of soot on his face. We rebuild, replant if we need to. This doesn't change anything. But it had changed things, Eleanor realized in the days that followed. The fire had destroyed nearly a quarter of the ranch's grazing land. While the cattle loss was minimal, the impact on the ranch's finances would be significant. The damaged land would need at least a year to recover, meaning fewer cattle could be supported in the coming seasons. Beau never complained, throwing himself into salvage work with grim determination. Eleanor watched with growing concern as he worked from dawn until well after dusk, pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. A week after the fire, Eleanor found Beau in his office late at night, surrounded by ledgers and papers, his face drawn with fatigue. You need to rest, she said gently, placing a cup of coffee beside him. Too much to do, he replied without looking up. Need to figure out how to make up the shortfall from the lost pasture. Eleanor sat across from him. Beau, look at me. Reluctantly, he raised his eyes to meet hers. You can't solve everything in one night, she said. And driving yourself to exhaustion won't help the ranch recover. I can't afford to slow down, Beau argued. Not with winter coming, not with Blackwell watching for any sign of weakness. Eleanor reached across the desk to take his hand. What good is saving the ranch if you destroy yourself in the process? Beau's resistance crumbled at her touch. He sighed deeply, rubbing his free hand across his face. You're right, I know you're right. Come to bed, Eleanor urged. Things will look clearer in the morning. Beau allowed her to lead him upstairs, too exhausted to argue further. As she helped him remove his boots and settled a blanket over him, Eleanor's mind was already working on a possible solution to their predicament. The next morning, while Beau was out with the men assessing the damaged pasture, Eleanor rode into Silver Creek alone, ignoring the potential risk in her determination to help. Her destination was the bank where she had conducted business once before, shortly after her engagement, when she had deposited her silver dollar for safekeeping. Mr. Finch, the bank manager, greeted her with surprise. Mrs. Xavier, forgive me, Miss Taylor. We didn't expect to see you in town today. I need to discuss a financial matter, Mr. Finch, Eleanor said, taking a seat at his desk. It's rather urgent. Of course, the banker replied, his expression professionally neutral. How may I assist you? I understand that James Blackwell holds notes on several properties in the area, Eleanor began. I'm curious if he has approached you about financing an offer for the Lazy X Ranch. Mr. Finch's eyebrows rose slightly. That would be confidential information, Miss Taylor. I'm not asking for specifics, Eleanor clarified. Merely confirmation of what we already suspect, that Blackwell is preparing to make another offer in the wake of the fire. The banker hesitated, then said carefully, I can neither confirm nor deny any specific transactions. However, I will say that when ranches suffer significant damage or financial setbacks, it often attracts interested parties. As I thought, Eleanor said. Now, regarding my own finances, I'd like to make a withdrawal. She had made her decision during the night, watching Beau's troubled sleep. The silver dollar she had deposited had been more symbolic than practical a connection to her past, preserved for posterity rather than necessity. But now necessity had asserted itself. Returning to the ranch with her business concluded, Eleanor found Beau in the barn, repairing tack with methodical focus. He looked up as she entered, surprise and then concern crossing his features. You went to town alone? He asked, setting aside his work. Eleanor, that wasn't safe. Cal escorted me part of the way, she assured him, and I needed to see Mr. Finch at the bank. Beau's expression turned questioning. The bank? What for? Eleanor took a deep breath. Beau, I know the fire has put the ranch in a difficult financial position. I want to help. You already help, Beau said, puzzled. More than you know. I mean financially, Eleanor clarified. I want to invest in the ranch, our ranch. Beau's face closed off slightly. I can handle the finances, Eleanor. I know you can, she said carefully. But I have resources that could ease the immediate pressure while the land recovers. Resources, Beau repeated skeptically. Eleanor, I know you've been saving from your wages, and I appreciate the gesture, but not my wages, Eleanor interrupted. My inheritance. Beau stared at her. What inheritance? You said you lost everything. Not quite everything, Eleanor explained. When I left Virginia, I had a small amount of family jewelry sewn into my clothing pieces too personal for the Union soldiers to take. I sold most of it along the way to survive, keeping only my mother's locket and one other piece. The coin, Beau said suddenly. Your silver dollar. It's not actually silver, Eleanor admitted. It's platinum made to resemble a coin for easy concealment. My father had several made when he feared the Confederacy would fall. This was the last one. Beau's expression showed disbelief. How much is it worth? Enough to help us replant the western pasture and tide us over until next season, Eleanor said. I've already spoken with Mr. Finch about converting it to currency. Beau was silent for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me about this before? It was my safety net, Eleanor said softly. My last connection to my family's wealth. I wasn't ready to part with it until now. And now you are, Beau asked, his voice gentle. Eleanor nodded. Now I have something more valuable to protect, our future together. Beau crossed the barn in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms with a fierce tenderness that took her breath away. I love you, Eleanor Taylor. More than I have words to express. Then don't express it with words, Eleanor whispered against his lips. Their kiss was a promise, deep and true, sealing their partnership in all things heart, home, and future. The platinum coin proved to be even more valuable than Eleanor had estimated, providing enough capital to not only recover from the fire's damage, but to make improvements to the ranch that Beau had long deferred. Most importantly, it eliminated any vulnerability that Blackwell might have exploited in the fire's aftermath. When Blackwell arrived at the ranch 2 weeks later, ostensibly to express concern about the fire but clearly to assess Beau's financial distress, he found instead a bustle of activity workers rebuilding fences, new cattle being delivered, and plans underway for enhanced irrigation from the creek. Seems you landed on your feet, Xavier, Blackwell observed with poorly disguised disappointment. Fire like that would cripple most operations. I'm not most operations, Beau replied evenly, and I have an excellent partner now. He placed his hand on Eleanor's back as she joined them on the porch, the diamond on her finger catching the sunlight. Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly at the gesture. Yes, I heard about your engagement. Congratulations. Thank you, Eleanor said, her tone coolly polite. We're to be married next month. Well, Blackwell said, adjusting his hat, I can see when I'm not needed. Good day to you both. They watched him ride away, his back stiff with thwarted ambition. Think he'll give up now? Eleanor asked. Not entirely, Beau said thoughtfully. But I think he'll look for easier targets for a while. Blackwell's a businessman at heart, for all his ruthless methods. He knows when an investment isn't paying off. Eleanor leaned against Beau's solid warmth. Good, because I have plans for this ranch that don't include James Blackwell. Do tell future Mrs. Xavier, Beau said, smiling down at her. Well, Eleanor began, her eyes sparkling with purpose, I've been thinking about diversifying. The creek gives us an advantage many ranches lack. We could add orchards along the banks, perhaps a small dairy operation. Beau listened with growing admiration as Eleanor outlined her vision practical, forward-thinking, building on the foundation he'd created but expanding it in ways he hadn't considered. When she finally paused for breath, he simply shook his head in wonder. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Are my ideas too ambitious? No, Beau assured her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm just thinking that when you tried to pay me with your last coin that day in the store, I got the better end of the bargain by far. Eleanor smiled, remembering the moment that had changed both their lives. I disagree. I believe we both received exactly what we needed. On a perfect September morning, with the aspen trees beginning to turn gold against the evergreen hillsides, Eleanor Taylor became Eleanor Xavier in a ceremony at the Silver Creek Church. The entire town turned out for the occasion, along with ranchers from miles around, curious to witness the union of the reserved rancher and the refined Easterner who had captured his heart. Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk that she and the local seamstress had labored over for weeks. Beau, unrecognizable to many in his formal suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle toward him, her face radiant with happiness. Never thought I'd see the day, Cal whispered to one of the ranch hands as they watched the couple exchange vows. Boss smiling like that. Love changes a person, came the knowing reply. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the Lazy X, where tables had been set up in the yard beneath cottonwood trees strung with lanterns. There was music and dancing, feasting and laughter, as the community celebrated not just a marriage but a renewal of the land, of hope, of belief in the future. As evening fell and the party continued around them, Beau led Eleanor away from the festivities to a quiet spot by the creek. From his pocket, he produced a small leather pouch. A wedding gift, he explained, placing it in her hand. Eleanor opened it to find a silver dollar, a real one this time, hanging from a fine chain. To replace the one you gave up, Beau said, helping her fasten it around her neck. Though it's hardly equal in value. You're wrong, Eleanor said softly, touching the coin where it rested against her skin. This is worth far more to me. How do you figure that? Beau asked, his arms encircling her waist. Eleanor smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting with love. Because the first coin bought us survival. This one symbolizes our prosperity, our future. In the distance, music and laughter rose from their wedding celebration. Before them stretched the land they would nurture together. Behind them lay the separate paths that had somehow, against all odds, converged at a general store counter when a desperate woman tried to pay with her last coin, and a lonesome rancher closed her hand around his heart instead. Our future, Beau echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss as the first stars appeared in the Montana sky, witnesses to the beginning of a love story that would become part of the very land itself. In the years that followed, the Lazy X flourished under Beau and Eleanor's partnership. The orchards Eleanor had envisioned took root along the creek banks, producing apples and pears that found eager markets. A small dairy operation provided additional income during cattle market downturns. Children came first, a son they named William after Beau's father, then twin daughters who inherited Eleanor's auburn hair and Beau's blue eyes. James Blackwell eventually sold his holdings and moved east, defeated not by confrontation, but by the steady, inexorable success of the ranch he couldn't acquire. The Xavier family's reputation for fair dealing and innovation spread throughout the territory, bringing new settlers who sought their advice and friendship. And always, Eleanor wore the silver dollar around her neck, a reminder of how the most precious things in life often come disguised as moments of deepest desperation. Of how a single act of kindness can change everything. Of how love, once found, can transform not just two hearts but an entire future, vast and promising as the Montana sky.